Imagine you're walking through a dense forest. You are alone and you are scared. But you come across a cabin in the woods. And as you peer inside, you are met with a peculiar scene. A clock on the wall, army men figurines strewn across the room, a vat of what seems to be acid, and the bones of many dead animals. At the center lies a table with a deck of playing cards. But something is wrong. You reach for the cards, and on the back of one of them, you read the words, Inscription. Something is very, very wrong. For all of my life, I have played games, but I don't play games because of the many that excite me. I play for the few that envelop me. The Mass Effects, the Cyberpunks, Inside, Elder Scrolls, Prey. Inscription is one of those games. Because what on the surface looks like a mere card game, much like many we have played before, is secretly a dive into madness, a journey into a world bloodied with horror and intrigue, an expedition into our souls. And at the core of it lies a game beautifully well thought out, constructed, and executed.
I think this woman's actually from Game Funa. She came to my door yesterday, didn't answer. This time I'm gonna report it. Hi!
Hi there! I'm floppy disk for a game called Inscription.
I put a lot of time into Inscription at this point, 15 to 20 hours or so. All on my stream, mind you, by which the way, feel free to check out if you guys are interested. I stream every day right on this channel. And my biggest takeaway from all that time is just how underappreciated this game really is. But it makes sense. Not only is this game in a pretty niche genre to begin with, that being card games, but the magic of the game itself relies on you really not knowing anything about it. And after all, how do you market a game when its selling point is that you don't know anything about it? Inherently, Inscription is a game of 3 distinct acts, where having any clue that Act 2 or 3 even exist negatively impacts the overall experience. So in most trailers and reviews for this game, all you see is small tidbits from the first. And so that is where we will begin. You see, the game opens up with you being greeted by a mysterious hidden figure in an abandoned cabin. You were referred to as a challenger, and really, that's all you get. The game immediately begins, and in no time, you're playing a fairly standard card game. And that really isn't a bad thing. You see, the things that make Inscription so great isn't actually the card game itself, but everything surrounding it. However, that's not to say that the card game of Inscription isn't great either. You are given a board with 8 card slots total, 4 on your side and 4 on your opponent's. And each round you choose to draw either a card from your deck, the left pile, or a card from the right pile, squirrels that you can use as sacrifice to play other cards. You can see each card has a symbol denoting the amount of blood sacrifice you must make to play it. 1 blood, 1 sacrifice, and so on and so on. And each card, as expected, has potential special abilities in the form of sigils, like the ability to block all incoming attacks from an opponent that turn. Each card has an attack and defense stat, and each round you do damage to the enemy, you add a weight to the scale. Once the scale is low enough on the opponent's side, you win or you lose, if vice versa. And along the way, you have the chance to use special items you found as well. So it seems simple enough on paper. However, the real fun lies in just how many synergies there are between the cards and how many interesting decks you can create. Really, what makes any good card game a good card game is inherently here as well. But while the strategy of Inscription may not be on the levels of, say, a Gwent or Magic the Gathering, it reaches greatness in another way. It quickly becomes apparent after defeating your first few opponents that this is more than just a card game. Not only are you making upgrades to cards through weird mechanics like blood sacrifice, but you soon discover that you can actually leave the table you are playing at entirely. When you first stand up and away from the table, you are met with an entire cabin scene, and you realize this game is much, much more than just a weird and creepy card game. You see, in between rounds on each of your runs, you are able to stand up and explore the cabin, solving a myriad of puzzles that allow you to unlock new cards and mechanics that can help you defeat the final boss. And this is the first thing that really makes this game so special. Each system in the first act is so elegantly designed and intertwined together. Exploring the cabin and figuring out its secrets helps you unlock new and powerful cards to play in the card game each round. And playing the card game itself leads to many clues on how to solve the puzzles in the cabin. This means you'll constantly be alternating between a card game genius and Sherlock Holmes solving the mystery of who you are and where you are in this cabin. And it leads to an exhilarating narrative filled with mystery and intrigue as to what the hell is going on. A great example of how these systems interact is actually within the cards themselves. You see, some of the cards act as almost a main character of sorts, and will actually talk to you in between rounds and give you clues on not only how to find more main character cards, but also how to solve some of the puzzles of the game. And it means even while playing the base card game itself, you are learning more about the narrative and the systems and the mysteries of the game. But it only gets better from here. You see, each time you die in Inscription, for the first act at least, you are presented with the opportunity to make a death card. A card combining the stats from multiple cards from your deck from the turn before where you just died. Creating, in theory, super powerful cards with no cost, high attack, and an amazing assortment of special abilities. This makes the mechanics of losing an Inscription almost a reward, as it allows you to not only potentially unlock more story beats, but to create the potential of a more powerful deck in the future. This means whether you are dying, exploring the cabin, or playing the base card game and trying to win your way through each boss with unique mechanics, you are having fun and discovering more of the story and intrigue along the way. And all with this is packaged into a perfect pacing for the story. And it's a key element that most games get so wrong. The ability to keep a player engaged at all times, while constantly throwing new mechanics and gameplay elements at them. There were so many times in this first act where I thought I had figured it all out, until I realized something entirely new, solved a new mechanic, or found an entirely new type of card that completely changed the way I played the game. And the funniest part is, if this was all the game was, I would still say it was a great and interesting card game that any card game lover should at least try. But you see, it's only after beating the final boss in this first act, this first section, that the game truly shows its colors. After struggling through the fourth and final boss many times, and finally beating him, this is where the game opens. Only after multiple hours of gameplay and mystery solving did the true narrative start to unravel. The screen fades to white, and we are met with a multitude of recordings left on a tape. Everything has changed. And in the recordings, we meet a man named Luke, who runs a card game YouTube channel. He recently found a pack of cards for the game Inscription, and on his channel he unboxes them. To find one of the cards has a list of coordinates to a location nearby him. We see Luke go to the location and find a box with a floppy disk that contains the game we are playing, Inscription. The meta story has begun, and it becomes immediately clear that the character we are playing is in fact Luke, and that the story is about to get a lot more weird. And so Act 2 begins, and the game completely transforms into something more reminiscent of an old Pokemon game, where the Pokemon battles become card battles, but this time not only with the Beast decks from the first act, but 3 new decks including Magic, Robots, and the Dead, all with entirely new cards and mechanics that add to the already great Inscription gameplay. And you see, it's moments like this that make Inscription so damn good. There are so many players that will give up on this game in the first act and never even make it to this entirely new section, that will never discover the crazy meta story going on behind the scenes and never take the time to unravel more of the mystery. It's these types of moments that very few games get right. I think back to games like Red Dead Redemption 1, where it had a similar ending where you discovered an entirely new part of the map you didn't know existed, and forcing the player through many hours of one thing only to pull the rug out from under them and reveal so much more is an amazing twist when done correctly, but it's extremely hard to pull off one time, let alone multiple. And the game only continues this way. You find many more tapes, many with demon sounds. Mysterious people start coming to Luke's home in real life, and you discover more and more interesting cards and mechanics that can be used in the base game itself. In a lot of ways, Inscription actually reminds me of the game of last year, It Takes Two. That's because both games really rely on a sense of constantly keeping you on your toes, changing things up, and giving you new mechanics constantly. But where It Takes Two does this purely through gameplay, Inscription manages to accomplish this in its narrative as well. The crowning achievement of this game is, as I mentioned before, its ability to intertwine all of its systems like this in interesting ways. Discovering that you are Luke and playing as him in the game makes some of the previous dialogue and encounters suddenly make more sense. Discovering an entire new act where the game's aesthetic entirely changes is an amazing moment to experience, but it is grounded in the gameplay and mechanics of the previous act, meaning even with a huge new selection of cards, with new powers, new mechanics, and new ways to play, it still all immediately makes sense and is easy to pick up. Even though the new bosses will all have new powers you have never seen, you know enough of how the base game works to figure it out and beat them on the fly. It truly results in a spectacularly satisfying experience, and it is the key of what makes Inscription so damn good and so damn underrated. You see, most games are scared to take risks like Inscription does, where entire systems change, where you go from playing a first-person cabin horror game to a happy-looking Pokemon JRPG lookalike with sinister undertones. And from that act, you move on to the final one, where you are once again in first person, trapped in a scary new robot warehouse and a new story to unfold. This time, once again playing a card game with similar mechanics you are used to, but with all new foil of paint. In the first act, you unlocked cards each run by selecting them as you go, trying to make the most powerful deck possible within each run and starting over every time you died. In the second, you are playing a standard deck builder, where you can collect as many cards as you want and build the perfect deck for each situation, something you will have to change for many bosses to win. And in the final act, you once again are unlocking cards as you go, but this time with many twists on basic game mechanics like the size of the board and how many cards there are and how many upgrades are working. For many studios, Inscription would have been 3 separate games, the first, second, and third of a trilogy. But the magic of Inscription is it packs all of this into one, and along the way intertwines a compelling and interesting narrative of a man who has driven himself to insanity and into the arms of danger, all due to a mysterious little card game, the very one you are playing now. Not a lot of games really make me think. Most games I simply play, have fun, and then move on, only to forget them with the passage of time. But Inscription is one of those few games that truly has the potential to capture you, and that is why it is so underappreciated and needs to be talked about more. One of the hardest things in game design is designing systems that can interact with one another in constantly new and interesting ways. Most games lay out the foundation from the beginning, show you a tutorial, and for the remainder of the experience, you simply play within that framework with no deviation. Inscription at every turn aims to deny this standard proposition. In its narrative and meta-narrative, you are met with twists and turns at a dizzying yet fun pace. In its gameplay, it almost struggles to let the player fall into a rhythm at any point, instead opting to forever throw new obstacles and challenges in their way. It's a game that is infinitely more challenging to make, yet also infinitely more rewarding when done right. And it also creates an experience very unique to the medium of gaming, something no other form of entertainment could accomplish in such a way. What on the surface looks like an okay indie card game with some horror elements is actually so much more. And I beg you, if you haven't given this game a shot, try it. If for nothing else than to see a masterfully executed game and vision, a game of horror and intrigue, of challenge and provocation of thought, or simply put, a mindfuck. Inscription is the type of game many creators at some point have probably dreamed of making. But it is very rare that these grand visions, however simple on the surface they are, can come to fruition. And for that, this game deserves to be celebrated.